So, since the since the Wuhan virus happened, everything has been going downhill for the rest of the world, and mainly China, losing standing with the rest of the world. They're losing a lot of credibility, whatever credibility they had. China is basically the warehouse of the world where you make all your products. But I think if this were to happen, this would be a huge mess for China. Best case scenario, they absorb North Korea, and it becomes a vassal state. And North Koreans effectively, they run North Korea through their proxies, which is not going to be as effective as the Kim family, because you know the grandfather Kim Il Sung was actually a pretty, he's actually a pretty revered leader in North Korea, and even though that he helped out the Soviets, he's a hero to the North Koreans because he's basically the George Washington. So, China's worst nightmare: why Kim Jong Un's health is the newest healthcare is a new headache. So, rumors of varied reports in the supposed deteriorating health of North Korea leader Kim Jong Un sent observers in a frenzy on Tuesday, and it's all speculation at this time. He's only 36 years old. Intelligence agencies, journalists, and researchers are trying to work out the state of play. In unexpected news and subsequent speculation from across the border to North Korea has been unwelcome surprise in Beijing, since the officials are already grappling with COVID-19 fallout. All these communist countries, authoritarian countries, they're lying about their numbers. North Korea doesn't want to tell anyone what the numbers are, because that's they don't want to hurt their reputation anymore. And China is obviously lying. You can't trust China. China's its numbers went from here to like here. It went completely parallel to the x-axis. It was like at 80% parallel to like the y-axis, and suddenly it went up to the x-axis. You don't see that. It's crazy in China. Even with an authoritarian government like the Chinese one, in the CCP, you're not going to have that kind of result. North Korea is going to be a volatile but useful foreign policy tool for China. The selective state policies of a handy buffer zone to keep democratic South Korea and tens of thousands of American troops away from the border is an important enough objective for China to commit more than 1 million troops on the Korean border. Imagine that. A million, like, God knows how many American soldiers and South Korean soldiers on their border. That's like having, imagine like your worst enemy, the Islamic State at the Canadian border. That's the equivalent to us. Ultimately, China values stability in the Korean Peninsula. Yeah, and they should. And at times shifted from tacit support for Pyongyang to condemnation. For example, when North Korea tested nuclear weapons and ICBMs, Beijing backed international sanctions on the regime, though it accused of facilitating international workarounds. Nonetheless, reports of Kim imminent denies risk fomenting unwelcome stability in North Korea. With no clear succession plan, his death or incapacitation could throw a heavy arm and a secretive state in chaos in China's border. But Beijing's hands are already full, and the lasting President Xi needs. Yeah. Xi's grand plan for global China is taking a beat this year. The Chinese Communist Party, increasingly looked out for the world in recent years, is leading its way through the COVID-19 pandemic, which originated in the city of Wuhan, whose rapid and near unchecked spread through has been blamed with great justification on the inactions of Chinese officials. When this started, they started jailing people who were reporting this. They started jailing doctors, and a lot of these doctors mysteriously happened to, fall ill and die. The subsequent crisis will stretch even the world's richest economy. It's already that the murmurs for the West that China should foot some of the bill. At the least, China skeptics are calling it a key production capabilities and supply lines to be reclaimed, and a threat to rearranging what made Beijing so wealthy. So I think the aftermath of this is going to be different. The world is going to work like a lot more suspiciously towards China. They took they took control of the supply lines. They sent home millions of tons, like hundreds of tons of PPE supplies, which slowed our response, as well as the misinformation campaign of the CCP, with the help of the WHO, that stopped us from reacting a week in advance, and that caused this virus to be worse than it is. It could have been multiple times, a lot less, scores of times worse. China's multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road project, designated to create a huge new trade network across Asia, Europe, and Africa, in its manifesto of China's global perspective and economic clout. The critics of this new evidence of Beijing's neocolonial ambitions at home, the totalitarian regime has been working hard to stamp out dissent all its forms. Helping by unprecedented surveillance network, the CCP jailed millions of Uyghurs and the minority group far western Xinjiang province, and human rights groups have been condemning this cultural genocide. Beijing maintains that its measures were not as extreme as the West has made it out, and the large policing operations needed to stamp out Islamic insurgencies and the restrictive regime. A lot of these Western countries are weak. They kowtow to these liberals who say, "Oh, that's Islamophobic, that's sexist." But China, you could say it's strong, but it's definitely dictatorial. It goes to these minorities and then it jails them. It puts them in prison. They put them in concentration camps, and they're harvesting the organs of these people. That's basically what the CCP is doing. They did it in Tibet. They're genociding the people culturally. They're Sinoizing them. They're destroying their culture, and they're completely taking over. Some 2,000 miles away on the other side of the country, many citizens of Hong Kong and China's jewels have been railing against the heavy hand of the CCP, demanding democracy and resignation of a Chinese-backed chief executive. Hong Kong is doomed. It's already going back into the hands of the Chinese in about 30 years. Yeah, not even 27 years. Like 2047, it's going back to the hands of the Chinese. And ailing dead Kim is a volatile element, adding to already mixed former special representative of North Korea policy. Joseph Woon told Newsweek that it would be a huge deal for China if Kim's health was deteriorating. Whatever happens, you notice it's critically important that Beijing and its leaders in North Korea trust and can rely on. Beijing wants someone who they know they have a relationship with. Chaos is a worst-case scenario and threatens the power vacuum that South Korea or the U.S. could exploit, Yoon said. China more at stake than really anyone else except for South Korea, he said. The South Korea has no leverage. Beijing has plenty of leverage in Pyongyang. Korean Civil War collapse would mean millions of refugees flooding north and south, seeking refuge in China or South Korea. Many will be malnourished and will carry the scars of decades of living under the Kim regime. And his immersive propaganda campaign by Kazins, the senior director of Korean studies, the national interest of Newsweek, China's worst nightmare, besides the war years, is the North Korea being somehow destabilized. Chinese Communist Party is not a fan of Kim, despite his recent summits, but is also rather deal with the dictatorship. They know it's the power struggle where nuclear weapons would be in the grasp, and it's so close to them, or even perhaps the sale of things that were totally out of hand. Wow. But the reality is that outside of Kim's inner circle, his condition is many plans of succession if he is to die. Sadly, North Korea is an ultimate intelligence black hole. The fact that end up like a TMZ Kardashians rumor piece is most of the times whatever. So more or less, this would be a nightmare scenario for all those involved: South Korea and the U.S. as well as China. I don't think the U.S. would want to immediately put their troops by the Chinese border. It's honestly what caused the Korean War in the first place. The United States was winning, and then the Chinese set their troops. So yeah, if you like my content, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And follow me on my social media down below.